The auction hall of Station Omega-12 smelled like rust and broken dreams. Stood at the back of the room, her worn jacket covered in grease stains that would never wash out. She had been a mechanic on this salvage station for 5 years, and in that time, she had learned one important truth. The galaxy threw away things that still had value. Around her stood representatives from a dozen species. They towered near the front, their crystalline bodies catching the dim light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. The Morrow clicked and buzzed in their language, their compound eyes scanning data pads filled with ship specifications. They stood in a group near the door, their reptilian scales gleaming under the lights as they whispered about profit margins. Had no data pad. She had no team of advisors. She had only her eyes, her instincts, and a lifetime of fixing things that others said could not be fixed. The auctioneer, a thin with a cracked crystal along one arm, called out the next item. Lot 447, designation Rec 7749, unknown origin, unknown age. Scans show no functional systems, no power signature, hull composition unidentified, starting bid at 500 credits. On the display screen behind the auctioneer, an image appeared. It was a ship unlike anything had ever seen. The hull was smooth and dark, like polished stone, but with curves that seemed almost organic. It had no visible weapons, no obvious engines, no windows. It looked like something that had grown rather than been built. The representative raised a hand. "We have scanned this vessel extensively. The technology is incompatible with any known system. We pass." The Morrow speaker stepped forward, mandibles clicking rapidly. "Our analysis shows this vessel has been dormant for over 200 years. There is no market value. The Morrow collective passes." A warlord laughed, a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. "That hull is worthless, cannot be melted, cannot be reshaped, cannot be sold. We pass." One by one, every species in the room rejected the ship. The auctioneer looked bored. This happened sometimes. Some wrecks were so useless that they would simply be pushed into the nearest sun to clear space in the salvage yards. "Final call," the auctioneer said. "Any bids for Rec 7749? Raised her hand. The room went quiet. Every eye, every compound lens, every crystal sensor turned to look at the small human woman in the back of the room. "The human bids," the auctioneer said, surprise clear in his voice. 500 credits, any other bids?" Silence. "Sold to the human mechanic." Felt her heart pounding as she walked to the payment desk. 500 credits was everything she had. Every credit she had saved over 5 years of working double shifts, eating cheap food, and living in the smallest quarters the station offered. She was betting her entire future on a ship that the entire galaxy had just called worthless. The warlord passed her on his way out. He looked down at her with yellow eyes full of contempt. "Stupid human," he growled. "You just bought the most expensive piece of garbage in the sector." Did not respond. She simply took her ownership documents and walked toward the salvage yards. The yards stretched for kilometers, a floating graveyard of dead ships from every corner of the galaxy. Rode a small transport pod through the maze of twisted metal and shattered hulls until she reached the far edge, where the oldest wrecks were kept. Rec 7749 sat alone in the darkness, surrounded by empty space, as if even the other dead ships wanted nothing to do with it. Up close it was even stranger than it had looked on the screen. The hull seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When reached out and touched it, she felt warmth under her fingers. That was impossible. Space was cold. Dead ships were cold. But this hull felt almost alive. She found what might have been an airlock and spent 2 hours figuring out how to open it. The mechanism was unlike anything she had encountered, but she was patient. She tried different pressures, different rhythms, different combinations. Finally, something clicked, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the air was stale but breathable. That was the second impossible thing. A ship that had been dead for 200 years should have no atmosphere at all. Walked through dark corridors, her flashlight cutting through the shadows. The interior was as strange as the exterior. The walls curved and flowed like frozen waves. There were no sharp corners anywhere. The floor felt soft under her boots, almost like walking on thick carpet. She found what seemed to be a control room at the center of the ship. There was no captain's chair, no obvious control panels, no screens. Just a raised platform in the middle of the room with a single pillar rising from it. The pillar was made of the same dark material as the hull, smooth and warm to the touch. Sung-Ho's voice crackled over her communicator. "Are you there? I heard what you did at the auction. Everyone is talking about it. They say you have lost your mind." Sung-Ho was another human, an engineer who had worked at the station even longer than. He was 40 years old, with gray starting to show in his black hair and worry lines carved deep into his face. He had been her only friend on this station full of aliens who looked down on humans. "I am inside the ship," replied Sung-Ho. "Something is wrong with all those scans they did." "What do you mean?" "This ship is not dead." She placed her hand on the central pillar. "I think it is just sleeping." The moment her palm made full contact with the pillar, something happened. Light began to flow through the walls, thin lines of soft blue that spread like veins through the entire ship. The warm hum she had felt through the hull grew stronger, and she could now hear it too, a deep vibration that seemed to resonate in her chest. Sung-Ho's voice came through again, urgent now. "I am picking up energy readings from your location. That is impossible. That wreck has been dark for 2 centuries. The lights grew brighter, the hum grew louder, and then from somewhere deep within the ship a voice spoke. It was not a language recognized. It was not a language anyone in the galaxy would recognize. It was old, older than any civilization currently sailing the stars. The words rose and fell like music, like poetry, like a song that had been waiting 200 years for someone to hear it. Stood frozen in the blue light, her hand still pressed against the pillar, as the ship that everyone had rejected began to wake up. The voice spoke again, and this time somehow understood a single word. "Welcome." She smiled in the darkness, surrounded by impossible light, standing in a ship that should not exist. "Hello," she whispered back. "My name is I am going to fix you." The ship hummed in response, and for the first time in 200 years, the Eternal Covenant was no longer alone. 3 weeks passed and did not leave the ship. She slept in a small alcove that the ship seemed to create for her, the walls curving to form a bed-shaped hollow that was surprisingly comfortable. She ate ration bars from her pack and drank water from the station's supply lines that she had connected to the ship's hull. She worked 18 hours a day, exploring, mapping, and learning. The ship was alive. Not alive like a person or an animal, but alive in a way that had never encountered before. Its systems were not mechanical or electronic. They were something else entirely, a blend of organic material and technology so advanced that it seemed like magic. The blue lights that had awakened on her first day now followed her wherever she went, lighting her path and dimming behind her. The walls responded to her touch, opening passages when she needed them and closing others when she was done. The ship was watching her, learning her, just as she was learning it. The voice spoke to her sometimes. It was fragmented, broken, like someone trying to speak through a damaged radio. Most of the time could not understand the words, but slowly, day by day, the communication improved. On the 10th day, the ship showed her its name. A holographic display flickered to life above the central pillar. It showed symbols that did not recognize, but somehow, in her mind, she understood their meaning. Eternal Covenant. "That is your name," said softly. "Eternal Covenant, it is beautiful." The ship hummed in response, and the lights pulsed brighter for a moment. On the 14th day, the ship showed her its builders. The holographic display changed, showing images of beings that no one in the modern galaxy had ever seen. They were tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to shift colors like oil on water. Their eyes were large and dark, filled with an intelligence that was both alien and somehow familiar. They moved through cities of impossible architecture, buildings that grew like trees and ships that swam through space like fish through water. The architects breathed. Every species in the galaxy knew the legends. The architects were the first civilization, the ones who had sailed the stars before any other species had learned to walk upright. They had built wonders that still dotted the galaxy, ruins and artifacts that no one could understand or replicate. And then, millions of years ago, they had vanished without a trace. Most scientists believed the architects were myths, stories told by primitive species to explain technology they could not understand, but was standing inside proof that they had been real. "Where did they go?" she asked. The ship's response was a feeling more than words: sadness, loss, a sense of something ending that should have lasted forever. The architects had not been destroyed. They had chosen to leave for reasons the ship either could not or would not explain. But before they left, they had hidden their guardian ships across the galaxy. They had placed them in junkyards and debris fields, disguised them as worthless wrecks, and programmed them to wait for someone worthy to find them. "Why could the other species not wake you?" asked. The ship showed her. They had scanned the Covenant with their crystal-based sensors, looking for energy patterns and power signatures. They had found nothing because the ship's energy was not the kind their technology could detect. The Morrow had tried to interface with the ship using their hive mind networks, seeking a logical system they could connect to. They had failed because the ship did not operate on pure logic. They had examined the hull, looking for materials they could harvest and sell. They had given up because the hull could not be cut, melted, or broken by any tool they possessed. Every species had approached the ship with their own assumptions about how technology should work, and every species had been wrong. "But I did not scan you," said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. "I touched you, I talked to you, I treated you like you were alive." The ship pulsed with warmth. The architects had designed their guardian ships to respond to intuition, to emotion, to the kind of connection that could not be measured or calculated. They wanted guardians who would care for the ships, not just use them. Humans were young. Humans were primitive by galactic standards, but humans still remembered what it meant to form bonds with things that were not quite alive. They named their cars. They talked to their plants. They grew attached to machines in ways that other species found strange and foolish. That foolishness was exactly what the architects had been looking for. Sung-Ho visited on the 18th day. He stood in the airlock, his mouth hanging open as he looked at the blue-lit corridors stretching before him. "This is impossible," he whispered. "That is what I thought too," said with a smile. "Come, there is much to show you." She led him through the ship, explaining what she had learned. The Covenant was not a warship. It was a guardian vessel designed to protect rather than destroy. Its shields could cover entire fleets. Its engines could outrun anything in the galaxy. But its weapons, if it had any, were hidden so deep that even had not found them yet. "The navigation systems are damaged," she explained, showing Sung-Ho a section of the ship where the blue lights flickered and died. "The ship cannot plot a course on its own. It has been too long. Too much has degraded." Sung-Ho examined the damaged area with an engineer's eye. "This is beyond anything I have ever seen," he admitted. "I would not know where to begin." "Then we begin by trying things," said. "We experiment, we make mistakes, we learn." They worked together through the night, trying different approaches. Traditional repairs did not work. The ship systems rejected foreign materials like a body rejecting a transplant. But when placed her hands on the damaged areas and simply asked the ship to heal, something happened. Slowly, the organic technology began to respond, knitting itself back together with her guidance. "You are not repairing it," Sung-ho said in amazement. "You are helping it repair itself." "The ship knows what it needs," replied. "It just needs someone to help it remember." Word began to spread through Station Omega 12. The human mechanic who had bought the worthless wreck was living inside it now, talking to walls and claiming the ship was alive. Most of the station's residents laughed at the stories. Humans were known for being strange and sentimental, attaching emotions to machines and treating tools like pets. But some listened more carefully. Some noticed that energy readings from the salvage yards had changed. Some saw the faint blue glow that now surrounded the once dark ship. And one in particular took special interest. Was a crime lord who controlled the black market on Station Omega 12 and 3 neighboring systems. He was old for his species, his scales from decades of violence, his yellow eyes cold with calculation. He had dismissed the wreck at the auction, like everyone else, but his spies were now reporting something interesting. "The ship is active," he growled, reading the report on his data pad. "Yes, Lord," his lieutenant confirmed. "Low-level energy readings but growing stronger every day, and the human has been seen talking to it. Some of my people say the ship talks back." Leaned back in his chair, his claws tapping against the armrest. An architect ship. If the legends were true, a single architect vessel was worth more than entire planetary systems. Its technology could change the balance of power in the galaxy, and a weak, foolish human had somehow stumbled onto the prize of a lifetime. "Watch her," ordered. "Learn everything you can. When the time is right, we will take what should have been ours from the beginning." Deep in the salvage yards, surrounded by blue light and ancient technology, felt a sudden chill run down her spine. She looked up from her work, frowning. "What is wrong?" Sung-ho asked. "I do not know," she admitted. "I just felt like something dark was coming." The ship hummed around her, and for the first time the sound was not comforting. It was a warning. The first attack came without warning. Was working on a damaged conduit deep in the ship's lower section when she heard the airlock open. She had not been expecting visitors. Sung-ho always called ahead on the communicator. She moved quietly through the blue-lit corridors until she reached the main passage near the entrance. 3 stood there, their scales dark green in the alien light, their hands resting on weapons at their belts. They were looking around with greedy eyes, taking in the glowing walls and the strange organic technology. "Human," the largest one called out, "we know you are here. Lord wishes to speak with you about selling this vessel." Stepped into view, her arms crossed over her chest. "This ship is not for sale." The laughed, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Everything is for sale, little human. Lord is prepared to be generous. 5,000 credits, that is 10 times what you paid." "No." The laughter stopped. The lead stepped forward, his hand closing around the grip of his weapon. "You do not seem to understand your situation. Lord does not make requests. He makes offers that cannot be refused." "And yet I am refusing." The drew his weapon, a plasma pistol that could burn through steel. "Then we will take what we came for and leave your body for the salvage drones." He raised the pistol. And the ship responded. A wave of energy pulsed through the corridor, visible as a shimmer in the air. It struck the 3 and pushed them backward with irresistible force. They flew through the airlock, tumbling into the void beyond, only their emergency suits saving them from the vacuum of space. The airlock slammed shut behind them. Stood alone in the corridor, her heart pounding. She had not done anything. She had not even asked for help. The ship had protected her on its own. "Thank you," she whispered. The walls pulsed with warm light in response. 3 days later, the Galactic Trade Council sent an official notice. Read it on her data pad, her face growing pale with each sentence. The notice stated that she had acquired technology of significant historical and scientific importance. It demanded that she surrender the vessel to the Council for proper study and preservation. It gave her 30 standard days to comply. "They cannot do this," Sung-ho said, reading over her shoulder. "You bought the ship legally, you own it." "They can do whatever they want," replied bitterly. "The council is controlled by the Morrow and the same species that rejected this ship at auction. Now that they know it has value, they want it back." A new message arrived. This one was from the representative who had spoken at the auction. It read, "The matter of Rec 7749 has been reviewed. The Council has determined that architect technology, if confirmed, represents a heritage belonging to all species. A single human cannot be trusted with such responsibility. Surrender the vessel peacefully, and you will be compensated for your purchase price. Resist, and you will face criminal charges for endangering galactic security." Deleted the message without replying. She needed help. She needed someone who could move supplies without being watched, who could slip past the Council's growing surveillance. She needed a pilot. Han arrived at the salvage yards 3 days later, flying a small courier ship that looked like it was held together by hope and welding tape. She was 28 years old, with short black hair and quick eyes that never stopped moving. She had been running cargo between stations for 5 years, staying one step ahead of pirates, customs officials, and crime lords. "You are the crazy mechanic everyone is talking about," said as she stepped aboard the Eternal Covenant. Her eyes went wide as she took in the glowing corridors. "Okay, maybe not so crazy after all." "I need supplies," explained. "Engine components, power cells, medical equipment. The Council is watching the main shipping lanes. Can you get through?" Smiled, a sharp expression that promised trouble. "Getting through is what I do best." Over the next 2 weeks, made a dozen runs, bringing back everything needed to continue her work. She flew through asteroid fields and smuggler routes, dodging patrols and slipping past checkpoints. Each time she returned, she spent a few hours on the Covenant, helping where she could and learning about the ancient ship. "This ship is amazing," said one evening, sitting in the control room with Sung-ho. "Why would anyone ever call it worthless?" "Because they could not see what it really was," replied. "They scanned it with machines and decided it was dead. They never thought to just ask it if it was alive." The ship hummed around them and laughed. "I think it likes that answer." But time was running out. Day 25 came and the Council sent another message, more threatening than the last. Day 27 and ships began circling the station, waiting for their chance. Worked without sleep, pushing herself to the limit. The ship's engines were almost ready. The shields were functional, but the navigation systems were still damaged, unable to calculate safe courses through space. "We need more time," Sung-ho said, exhaustion heavy in his voice. "We do not have more time," replied. On day 28, she made a decision. "I will fly manually," she announced. Sung-ho stared at her in shock. "That is impossible," said. "No one can fly a ship this size without navigation computers. The calculations are too complex. The reaction times are too fast. Humans have been flying by instinct since we first learned to throw rocks," replied. "Before we had computers, we had our eyes and our hands and our gut feelings. I am not going to calculate the course. I am going to feel it." The ship pulsed around them, and felt something like approval flowing through the connection she had built with the Covenant. "The architects did not design this ship to be operated by machines," she continued. "They designed it to be guided by a living mind, a mind that trusts its instincts, a mind that connects with the ship rather than controlling it." Day 29 arrived, and everything fell apart at once. Could wait no longer. He knew the Council fleet was on its way, and if they arrived first, he would lose his chance at the greatest prize in the galaxy. He gathered his private fleet, 12 warships armed with weapons that were illegal in most systems, and moved toward the salvage yards. At the same time, the Council sent their final warning: surrender now or be boarded by force. Sat in the central chamber of the Eternal Covenant, her hand pressed against the pillar, her mind connected to the ship's awakening consciousness. "They are coming," she said quietly. "All of them, they all want to take you." The ship responded with a feeling that understood perfectly. It had waited millions of years for someone to wake it. It had finally found a guardian who saw its true value. It was not going to let anyone take that away. "Then let us leave," said. "Let us show them what we can do together." Sung-ho, and strapped into emergency seats that the ship created for them, remained standing at the central pillar, her connection to the Covenant stronger than ever. Outside, fleet opened fire on the salvage yard's defenses, clearing a path to the wreck they had once dismissed as worthless. Inside, the Eternal Covenant began to wake up completely. The engines that had been silent for millions of years roared to life. The hull, dark for so long, began to glow with inner light. The ship rose from its resting place, scattering debris and lesser wrecks, ascending from the graveyard like a phoenix rising from ashes. Watch from his flagship, his yellow eyes wide with a mixture of greed and fear. "All ships," he commanded, "stop that vessel. I want it intact, but I want it stopped." The battle for the Eternal Covenant had begun. The Eternal Covenant rose through the salvage yards like a creature waking from a long sleep. Metal debris bounced off its shields. Broken ships spun away from its path. The ancient vessel moved with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large, weaving through the graveyard of dead ships, as if it remembered every obstacle from the centuries it had spent waiting. Stood at the central pillar, her eyes closed, her mind merged with the ship's consciousness. She did not see through her own eyes anymore. She saw through the Covenant's sensors, feeling space around her in every direction at once. It was overwhelming and beautiful and terrifying all at the same time. "Enemy fleet ahead," Sung-ho called out from his seat, watching a display the ship had created for him. 12 ships. They are moving to intercept." "I see them," replied, though see was not quite the right word. She felt them, like dark spots against the brightness of the stars. His voice crackled over an open channel. "Human, shut down your engines and prepare to be boarded. This is your only warning." Did not respond. Instead, she pushed the Covenant forward, aiming for a gap between two of the warships. The opened fire. Plasma bolts and missiles streaked through space, converging on the Covenant from multiple directions. Felt them coming before they hit, felt the ship's shields responding automatically, absorbing the energy and dispersing it harmlessly into space. "Shields holding," Sung-ho reported, amazement in his voice. "They are not even scratching us." But knew they could not just absorb fire forever. The ship had been dormant too long. Its power reserves were low. They needed to escape, not fight. She searched for options and found one: the shattered corridor. It was a region of space filled with asteroids, debris, and gravitational anomalies. Ships entered it regularly. Not all of them came out. The constantly shifting rocks made navigation computers useless. The only way to fly through was with pure skill and instinct. "No," said, understanding immediately what she was planning. "The corridor has killed hundreds of pilots. It is suicide." "It is our only chance," replied. "Their computers will not help them in there, but I am not using a computer." She aimed the Covenant at the entrance to the shattered corridor and pushed the engines to full power. Fleet pursued. More weapons fire splashed against the shields, draining power with each hit. Warning signals began to pulse through's connection with the ship. The shields were weakening. They could not take much more punishment. The first asteroids appeared ahead, tumbling through space in chaotic patterns. Did not slow down. She flew into the chaos, trusting her instincts, trusting the connection with the ship, trusting millions of years of human evolution that had turned her ancestors into the best hunters and navigators on Earth. The Covenant twisted and rolled, missing a building-sized rock by meters. It dove under a cluster of spinning debris and rose above a field of metallic fragments. Did not think about the maneuvers. She simply felt them, her hands moving against the pillar, her body swaying with the ship's motion. Behind her, fleet followed. The first ship hit an asteroid within seconds of entering the corridor. It exploded in a flash of light, debris scattering across space. The second ship tried to avoid the explosion and flew directly into a spinning rock the size of a house. "Two down," Sung-ho reported grimly. But the others kept coming, was obsessed now, unwilling to give up the prize he had dismissed so easily at the auction. He drove his ships forward, accepting losses, demanding more speed. A chunk of rock struck the Covenant's lower hull. The impact threw from her seat, and she cried out as she hit the deck. Sung-ho rushed to help her, finding blood on her forehead from a cut above her eye. "She needs medical attention," Sung-ho called out. "I know," replied, her voice strained. "I am trying to get us out of here." The ship shared her urgency. It showed her patterns in the chaos, pathways through the debris that human eyes alone would never have seen. The connection between human intuition and architect technology was working exactly as the builders had intended millions of years ago. But was catching up. His flagship was faster than the others, and its captain was skilled. Plasma fire began to hit closer, some shots getting through the weakening shields. "How much farther?" asked weakly, holding a cloth to her bleeding head. "I do not know," admitted. The ship responded to her uncertainty with information. It showed her its own history, compressed into seconds of understanding. The architects had built guardian ships and hidden them across the galaxy. They had disguised them as worthless wrecks because they knew that the worthy would look past appearances. They wanted guardians who could see value where others saw nothing. But there was more. The Eternal Covenant was not the only guardian ship. There were hundreds, maybe thousands, scattered across known space, all waiting, all dormant, all hoping that someday someone would find them. "We are not just running for ourselves," realized aloud. "If captures this ship, he will use it to find the others. He will turn guardian vessels into weapons of war." The thought gave her new strength. She pushed deeper into her connection with the ship, becoming one with the ancient technology in a way she had not thought possible. The ship responded, sharing more of itself with her, trusting her completely. An asteroid field appeared ahead, denser than anything they had passed before. There was no clear path through. Any computer would have said it was impossible. Smiled and flew in anyway. The Covenant spun and twisted like a living thing, threading through gaps that should not have existed, anticipating the movement of rocks before they happened. Was not flying anymore. She was dancing, moving through space with the grace of something that belonged there. Behind her, remaining ships began to fall. One by one, they hit debris, misjudged distances, or simply could not match the impossible maneuvers of the ancient vessel. By the time reached the far edge of the corridor, only's flagship remained. The exit appeared ahead, clear space beckoning beyond the last of the tumbling rocks. But was right behind them, and his weapons were charging for a final shot. "I am going to hit you with everything I have," growled over the open channel. "I would rather destroy that ship than let a human keep it." Felt his weapons lock onto the Covenant. She felt the ship's shields flickering, nearly exhausted. She felt Sung-ho and behind her, trusting her to save them. And then the ship asked her a question. It was not in words. It was a feeling, deep and profound, rising from the ancient consciousness that the architects had created so long ago. "Do you wish to protect them?" Understood what the ship was asking. It was asking if she was ready to become a true guardian. Not just someone who had bought a ship, but someone who would dedicate herself to protecting others. "Yes," she said without hesitation. Power surged through the Covenant. Systems that had been dormant since before recorded history came online in a cascade of light and energy. The ship began to change, its hull shifting and expanding, plates sliding and reconfiguring into a new shape. Fired his weapons. The blast should have destroyed them. Instead, It splashed against a shield unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Energy spread across a barrier that extended far beyond the Covenant's hull, forming a dome that covered kilometers of space. The Eternal Covenant had revealed its true form, not a warship, not a fighter, a mobile fortress designed to protect entire fleets, a guardian vessel in the truest sense. Stared at his sensors, his yellow eyes wide with shock and sudden fear. "What is this?" he whispered. Opened a channel to reply. "This is what the architects built," she said. "A guardian, and I am its pilot." The final confrontation was about to begin. The Eternal Covenant hung at the edge of the shattered corridor, transformed into something that belief. What had once looked like a simple ship now spread across space like a flower made of light and metal. Energy barriers extended outward in overlapping layers, forming a protective sphere that could have sheltered a dozen vessels within its embrace. The dark hull now glowed with patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living things, ancient symbols of the architects pulsing with power that had slept for millions of years. His flagship faced them alone. The rest of his fleet lay scattered through the corridor behind them, broken and burning among the asteroids. "Fire everything," commanded, desperation cracking his voice. His ship unleashed its full arsenal. Plasma cannons, missile batteries, energy beams, everything his weapons officers could bring to bear. The barrage would have destroyed a station. It would have cracked a small moon. The Covenant's shields absorbed it all without flickering. Stood at the central pillar, no longer just connected to the ship but truly merged with it. She felt the weapon's fire as distant warmth against her skin. She felt the shields as an extension of her own will to protect. She was the Covenant, and the Covenant was her. But she did not feel anger. She did not feel the desire to strike back. She felt sad. Had spent his life taking from others. He had built his empire on theft and violence and fear. He had come here to steal a ship that he had dismissed as worthless, not because he saw its true value, but because others had shown him it had value. He was a vulture, feeding on the scraps of greater beings. And now he was trapped, his weapons useless, his fleet destroyed, his life in the hands of the human he had threatened to kill. "What are you waiting for?" snarled over the open channel. "Destroy me. Is that not what you want?" "No," replied softly. She extended the Covenant's shields, pushing them outward until they wrapped around his flagship as well. The damaged vessel, limping from its passage through the corridor, was suddenly protected by the same barrier that defended the ancient ship. Stared at his readings in confusion. "What are you doing?" "Protecting you," said. "That is what guardians do." A chunk of debris from the corridor drifted toward the flagship. The shield deflected it gently, pushing it away without damage. Another piece followed, and another, all bouncing harmlessly off the barrier that had extended around her enemy. On the bridge of the flagship, his crew watched in stunned silence. They had followed their lord into certain death, and now a human was saving their lives. One of the officers stepped forward. "Lord, we should stand down." Turned on him with fury in his yellow eyes. "You dare question me?" "She is protecting us," another officer said. "After everything we did, after we tried to kill her, she is protecting us." The words spread through the crew like fire. They had been loyal to out of fear and greed, but fear and greed could not explain what they were witnessing now. The human had every right to destroy them. Instead, she was keeping them safe. Reached for his weapon, but his own officers moved faster. They grabbed him, restrained him, and pushed him to the deck. "This is mutiny," hissed. "No," the lead officer replied. "This is us choosing a different path." A new signal appeared on sensors. The Galactic Trade Council fleet had arrived, a dozen ships bearing the official markings of the combined government. They had expected to find wreckage. Instead, they found the Eternal Covenant in its full glory, shields extended protectively around the very people who had tried to destroy it. The Council flagship hailed them. A elder appeared on the communication display, his crystalline face unreadable. "Human vessel," he said formally. "You are ordered to stand down and surrender. The Council has ruled that architect technology must be placed under proper authority." Smiled. "With respect, Elder, the Covenant has already chosen its authority." The ship responded to her words, broadcasting a message on all frequencies. The words were in the architect language, ancient and beautiful, but somehow every species could understand their meaning. "This vessel has chosen its guardian. The Covenant is renewed." The message continued, explaining what the ship had shown during their connection. The architects had left their guardian ships as gifts to the future. They were meant to be found by those who could see value in the discarded, who could connect with machines through intuition rather than cold calculation. The worthy were not chosen by power or technology or status. They were chosen by their hearts. Humanity was young. Humanity was primitive by galactic standards, but humans had something the older species had lost in their evolution. They still remembered how to care for things. They still knew how to see potential where others saw nothing. They still believed that the broken could be made whole. The elder was silent for a long moment. Around him, his crew whispered among themselves, translating the architect message, discussing its implications. "You are saying," the elder finally said, "that these ships were hidden specifically to be found by species like humans." "I am saying that the architects wanted guardians, not owners," replied. "They wanted beings who would protect, not conquer. I did not come here to claim power over the galaxy. I came here because I saw a ship that everyone else had given up on, and I believed it deserved a second chance." The elder looked at his council members. They were faced with a choice that would shape galactic history. They could try to take the ship by force and risk war with technology they did not understand, or they could accept that humanity had earned something remarkable. "The Council recognizes your claim," the elder said at last. "Guardian Captain, may your watch be long and your shield strong." The channel closed, and the Council fleet began to withdraw. Inside the Covenant cheered despite her injury. Sung-Ho slumped against the wall in relief, exhausted but smiling, remained at the pillar, still connected to the ship, still feeling its ancient presence wrapped around her mind. "We did it," she whispered. The ship hummed with warmth and satisfaction. But they both knew the work was just beginning. There were other guardian ships out there, hidden across the galaxy, waiting for someone to find them. Some might be found by those who were worthy. Others might fall into the hands of people who would twist their purpose from protection to destruction. "Show me," said. The ship responded with a map of the galaxy, hundreds of points of light marking the locations of dormant guardian vessels. Some were close. Others were on the far side of known space. All of them were waiting. Sung-Ho looked at the map with wide eyes. "There are so many." "Then we have work to do," said, grinning despite the bandage on her head. Finally stepped back from the pillar, feeling her own body again for the first time in hours. She was exhausted, hungry, and more alive than she had ever felt. "Where do we start?" Sung-Ho asked. Studied the map, looking for ships that might be in danger of discovery by the wrong people. Her eyes settled on a distant point near the edge of explored space. "There," she said, "someone needs our help." The Eternal Covenant turned toward the stars. Its engines hummed with power that had waited millions of years to be used again. Its shields glowed with the promise of protection for all who needed it. In the salvage yards of Station Omega 12, a legend had been born. The human mechanic who had bought a worthless wreck and turned it into the most powerful vessel in the galaxy. The first guardian captain in millions of years. Sat in the command chamber she had once entered as a curious mechanic, now transformed into the heart of something greater than herself. She had come looking for a ship worth saving. She had found a purpose worth living for. The Covenant carried them into the darkness between stars, no longer abandoned, no longer forgotten, beginning its endless watch once more. And across the galaxy, other ships began to stir, sensing that the long wait was finally coming to an end.